My name is Elena Bonadonna, and I'm extremely warm welcome you all for our today 10th already webinar session. And I'm so happy. First of all, because it's already 10th webinar session. Second, because we got extremely amazing speaker today. So I cannot be happy more, guys. So before we start, I would just kindly ask you to let me know in the chat room that you hear me well, see me well, so we can continue. Just put a plus and write something that, yeah, connection is cool. Perfect. Hi, Mario. Yes, and guys, the number of attendees today is just crazy. So definitely we will have fun today as well. And yeah, everything. Yeah, hi from Switzerland. Hi from Dominican Republic. Yeah, as I noticed today, as I mentioned today, today we will learn from one of the best experts in the field, Dr. Bizhan Pourkomailian, and he's the Global Director of Restaurant and Distribution Food Safety at McDonald's Corporation. And I saw quite a lot of people who came from McDonald's specifically to listen to our today's session. And I'm extremely happy that you joined us, and I hope you will follow our further webinars as well. As far as we will talk today mainly about crisis management and incident handling, I cannot really waste your time more. I will just ask you guys to be active throughout today's session, write your questions, and don't wait until last minute because we are quite limited with the time. And I'm pretty sure you will have a lot to ask to our speaker. So Bizhan, if you are ready, I'll give my microphone to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully the screen will start showing, as I think it might just be. Let me know when it actually is showing my screen. That would be great. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. I hope you're very well. I cannot see any of you, so all I can see is my own face and the presentation. So I'm sorry that I cannot see you. But as soon as the screen is up, we will start the presentation. And it seems like my screen is saying it's not coming up at the moment, which is a shame. It was working earlier.
Yeah, let me know if I need to share a screen from my side as well. But guys, maybe if you want to ask something already to our speaker, you can already type some questions because I know that our time is quite limited. So just, oh, it's coming. So I'm
Excellent.
disappearing.
Okay. Can you see it now? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So here we go. I'm going to try and take you through a little bit about crisis management and how you handle incidences from a McDonald's perspective. And just before we start, I'm actually going to take you through McDonald's, what we are, who we are, and I would like to do that because it will give you a little bit of a context on why we do the things that we do in the way that we do them. Incident management is what I'm going to follow through after that, and then take you through a few takeaways from this presentation. We are going to be speaking later after I do my presentation, which will be approximately 25-30 minutes long, and hopefully you will not fall asleep. So, McDonald's, as most of you know, is we're a burger company, and but we are actually operating in over 100 different territories around the different markets. So UK, Germany, all the way across from the US side, all the way to the other side of the world in Australia, and up north from the Nordics, all the way down to South Africa. We work in with over 3,000 direct suppliers across the way, food suppliers. It's not that many when you look at a company this big, but this is because we work closely with those that we have partnership with in from an ethical, from a values point of view, and long term. If you think about McDonald's in the old days, about 60 years ago, we started working together with only a handshake. So we had a trust in place, which is one of the core values that we actually have. Today, of course, there are contracts, but all those years ago, we worked just on a handshake and agreement how we're going to work together to get better. We also transport food via 300 distributors across the world, about 340, 350 different distributors. We transport the food from from the suppliers across to our restaurants, making sure that we have a good control over the supply chain. And all of these distribution centers deliver to over 39,000 restaurants globally. And from there, of course, we have our customers, which are being served by approximately 2 million in the restaurants. So you can start imagining how risky that may become. If any of you do any risk assessment, you can have a look at this and say, well, how do you make sure that every one of these people operate the same way? Well, that will be a story for another day, perhaps. But all these 2 million staff that we have in 39,000 different restaurants deliver approximately 65 million customers daily, deliver to these customers. If any of you guys have done risk assessment, this is the exposure rate. So that's 65 million per day. And if you think about Six Sigma that we talk about, that's a million. So Six Sigma safety is not exactly what we want to have here because it's not enough. Because if you say Six Sigma safety, that would mean that 65 people having injuries every single day. So we don't want that. So our Sigma levels must be much, much higher than that when it comes to risk assessment. This is McDonald's. And in order to actually manage any kind of food system, we must make sure that we do have the possibilities of standardization across all of these. The same systems across restaurants, the same systems across the distribution centers, and the same systems across the suppliers. In this way, we can always make sure that we have the system in place to have an efficient and well planned crisis management or incident management. Moving on to instances now, we always start with instances because we try to make sure we don't have crises. So we start from an incident, and then if it gets worse, it becomes a crisis. So always try to manage the instances first. An incident is basically what we describe as a food or product issue that could be or be perceived to affect supply, health, or safety of the consumer or brand damaging. There are different categories of these because it can have a different effect. Sometimes these are just perceived risks and not real risks. And from that point of view, you have to manage them in a different way. Some of them are real and you have to handle them again differently to dependent on the severity of it. You can go from just making destroying the product or bringing it back or going all the way to the consumer and asking them to bring something back for you. Now, in the McDonald's world, there's the number of times that you would actually bring food back as a recall is very limited because the consumer would have immediately or very quickly after having bought the product, having actually bought and drank, eaten it or drank it. Very few items are taken home for longer times. Things like a bottle of orange juice, for example, are those things that can be taken away and could be recalled. But many of our products, in fact, almost all of them, are not subject to recall because they're in store and eaten in store or very quickly after that. Now, when we look at actually the instances, what can actually cause an instance if you take a bit more? Well, supply chain interruption can cause that. We saw that with COVID and because people cannot actually go from country to country, so the supply chain was interrupted. Bringing food or other items from a country in a European country to another European country could not occur because the borders were closed. Sometimes even city to city, even cross borders internationally, similar case. So supply chain can be interrupted and can cause an issue. This can also be as a result of politics, can be demonstrations, for example, or natural disasters, earthquakes, fires, tsunamis. These can also cause supply chain interruptions. And that itself is an incident. Incident doesn't necessarily have to mean that there's going to be somebody becoming ill. because it's affecting supply, which means it affects the business. Other ones is a product which has a fault with it. It could be a toy that is badly manufactured. It could be a food product that actually has in it seeds that you don't want to have. You may have a product that has been contaminated with some physical matter or other. But as you can notice, some of these are coming on top of each other. So contamination of product could be from the three typical hazards: physical, chemical, microbiological. These can also be the issues for having an incident occurring, glass in a product or chemicals. We've had dioxin before, we've had pathogens such as salmonella. All of these can be a reason for it. And there's others as well, such as mislabeling. If you're talking about a product that needs to have the right allergen information written on it, for example, could be there. Consumers' illnesses. So this is at the other end of it. So if someone has reported that there's been an illness, and then you have to stop products that is possibly implicated, to stop that and do the investigations. And that is, of course, part of the health and safety of the consumer. And I say consumer because I don't want to talk about customers, because I myself am a consumer and a customer at the same time, but also the staff in a restaurant are also consumers as well. So not necessarily coming and buying food, but because they get the food in their store. So they are considered consumers. And of course, there's security issues. So cybersecurity is another one of them, and possibility of someone manipulating something on purpose, putting something into it, or etc. This can also cause issues, not only health and safety point of view, but also it can cause issues with supply interruptions, and of course brand damaging. So all of these factors and more can be the cause of an incident. So when an incident occurs, the first and foremost thing that we all do is to create a group that can decide and think about how do we actually coordinate to manage that incident. And that team must be a multidisciplinary. You got to have in there people from communications, people from legal, you got to have quality assurance, food safety, product development, the management team, but not too many. If you have too many, it becomes a huge committee and no decision can be made, and you will go around the room discussing and discussing. And in any incident, time is of essence. You have to act very quickly. You must be very agile. You must consider the facts. You must consider data that's available in order to be able to make sound decisions and make actions, and must do it quickly. So, for example, when we're discussing about what is the problem, sometimes you need experts from outside and not just internally. Some of the companies that we look at, small and medium sized companies, do not have the right experts in house. They just cannot afford them. So they go externally find those who can advise them. But you can also, of course, use internal ones. You can have internal advisors, which are product specialists, for example, internal advisors on supply chain expertise. So you have to gather them around and ask them, let us get information. That expertise may be in the team, maybe not. So you could have a core team, and then you have the extended team, which will include the internal, external experts. Those experts can also be from the suppliers, can be from the raw material suppliers. It can be from the consumer end as well. Whoever that's needed, you should be able to bring in. Also, of course, discussing about legal. Now, legal is not just about the place you're in, because you could be cross-border transferring. So if you look at our system, we could have the same product in 4 or 5 or maybe more markets, depending on how many of the countries that supplier is providing the raw material to, if it's a raw material issue. So you must consider not just the legal issues inside the market where it's being produced, but the place where it's also being sold or delivered to. Of course, then we talk about what information do we need, the data we need. We need as much data as possible to be able to analyze, to find the actual risks and where those risks are and how to assess them. Without the data, we cannot really make profound decisions on where to go and what to do. So that is quite essential to get the right data and get them quickly. So, in a restaurant environment, for example, if a customer comes and complains, we need to have a form or a documentation process that we can get as much information as possible, and not only about what was the issue, but also the details of the people who are complaining, because we need to get back to them and explain how we are progressing and also make sure that they are still well. If somebody falls ill, we have a moral obligation making sure that they are being well looked after and they're not just left to their own devices. That data is essential, not only on the person or the ones who provide information about the possible issue, but also about what was the product. So that product information can be sought from the suppliers, from the handling of it, etc. If we're looking, for example, at supply chain interruption, we need to find out why is the interruption occurring and what can we do to overcome it, of course. But at the same time, we need to find out what is the issue in order to find out when we can actually go back to normal situation. We must also consider what resource do we need? Do we need extra people? Do we need extra equipment? Do we need extra transportation? So if there's been an interruption in the supply, so for example, the road is blocked, do we need to transport everything by air or by rail or by sea? If there is a transportation by rail failure, can we put the material on a truck and deliver it? So what resources do we need? Do we need external resources? Resources, just like I said earlier about the experts, internal and external. Can we actually go outside and find somebody? And do we need extra funding, for example? And in any situation that comes down to an incident, those resources must not be limited. Must do everything we can to make sure that people are safe and actually they're not hurt anymore. And then we must, of course, consider what actions do we take. Also remember that no action is an action. So sometimes when it's a perceived issue, you may decide there's nothing we need to do. It's a perception and there's nothing that we can do about that. And then, of course, it comes to communication. Very, very important. There's no point doing everything when you cannot communicate your actions to anybody, whether it is about bringing a product back, replacing a product, communicating outside to authorities, to the journalists, to the people who actually raise the issue. Communication is key. Having the right people to communicate as well. Sometimes some of the people that we pick, unfortunately, the way they look is just untrustworthy. It's not their fault. They could be telling the absolute truth, but because of the way people perceive that person, they're untrustworthy. On the other hand, you have somebody who is completely untrustworthy, but people trust them. It's about that person that you have to pick. It is a difficult one because we're dealing with people, seeing people, and also the environment in which they actually present. If you have somebody sitting behind a big desk with lots of books behind them, the first impression we have is actually it's a lawyer. And many people will not listen to lawyers when it comes to incident problems in this situation. You want somebody who can relate to the people. And we'll come to that in a few minutes as well, a bit more. But also, you got to consider how you're doing it. If you're actually going to be communicating across borders, then we are looking at how do we do that across different locations? What regulations are there? How we can communicate? What standards do they have from one to the next? And what is their culture? And also, of course, the age group. What age group are we targeting? Is it everybody or not? Because when we're communicating, these five factors are very important how to get a message across and not be misunderstood, and also understood that what is being presented is not fake, it's actually real, and it's meant to be. So when it comes to communication, which is trying to overcome language barriers, to be overcome not, the lack of information, being able to give the human factor in, and as well be very effective on how we do this, whether it is written or communicated verbally or visually. All of these things come into play. But with all of this, there's three key factors with any instant situation which needs to be brought forward. And those are the three C's. The first C is about concern. The company is a human company and should be seen as one that people are working that this is not a faceless, emotionless company. It is something that is run by people, and you must show concern genuinely for those who are not well or those who potentially could be facing serious health issues. You must show that concern in there. Second C is about control, showing people, those who you're communicating to, that you have the situation under control. You have not spared any resources, and you have not actually taken any kind of liberties anywhere, but actually use all the possible ways you can to control the situation. And finally, making sure that you have shown full commitment, that you will solve the problem and you will not give up until you have solved the problem. Sometimes, after investigation, it is understood that the one who's been investigated is not the one at fault, in somebody else. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do, in at least in the food industry, is to make sure that the food is safe and everybody learns from everybody. Food safety should not be used as a competitive advantage. And as a result, we must be totally transparent and work together. As an example, if there's an issue in a place that sells hamburgers, then it's not about just that one company. All the companies who sell hamburgers will come under scrutiny. So therefore, we must all work together. Food is an emotional way. Eating is an emotional area we must consider. So therefore, we must go with it with heart. We must not create an environment where somebody will question, should I eat there because it's safe or unsafe? That should just be a given that wherever you go to eat, the food is under control and it is actually safe to eat. So it becomes very important to have the three C's in place and being genuine and provide that concern for those who actually have had the un, unnecessary effect on them. Also showing them that you have the controlled environment, that you're managing it as well as anybody could hope for, and you're committed. It is one of the biggest issues that in communication, some companies decide not to communicate. Leaving something empty, people will fill that hole very clearly, very quickly. Imagine your own home. You do not need a wardrobe, a cupboard, or a drawer set. You put one in, very quickly it will get filled, even though you didn't need it. The same applies for instances or crises. If you do not provide information, people will make up their own information about it, and most of the time it is not correct. Therefore, you have to now fight the battle of correcting the misunderstood information, as well as provide the correct information and trying to counter it. So the work becomes doubly hard, if not more. So therefore, communicate effectively and quickly. You can even say when you're communicating, we are right now working on it and we'll have an answer for you tomorrow. You don't have to give full disclosure every single time. Remember that they need to know that you're working on it, you have it under control, you are concerned about those who have had an adverse effect, and you're committed to making sure it actually does work. So, when you consider the key takeaways, it's very important to know that one size does not fit all. So we, for example, we go local. Why? So we're a global company, but acting locally, understanding the local needs by having an understanding as well that there's a whole global process behind it, because that way we can manage things better. It must include all the departments to assess. So it doesn't have to be every one of those departments in the actual core team. The core team should be around about 7 people, maybe 9 maximum, a small group which has access to the key areas. So, for example, if there's a food issue, then of course you would have your food safety person, you have your supply chain person, you have your legal person, communications. These are core requirements of expertise. And these people should have access to others who can provide information. Must collaborate together and listen and learn from each other. We can also pull from other parts of the world that have had similar situations. If a if an incident occurs in a country, it doesn't mean that that country must work alone. They can work on other people's expertise and knowledges and experiences and expertise in the field of crisis management or incident management. Use any resources possible, but collaboration of listening to each other and not dismissing someone's ideas, but listen to them, brainstorm, make decisive decisions, and make sure that the actions are well thought through and you're committed to making those actions work to get to the root cause of the problem. And when we consider all of these actions, you have to also know very, very clearly who your audience is. Is your audience is general public? Is it the government? Or is it everybody altogether? What age group are they? What is their knowledge base? Speaking completely in a terms of technical words, acronyms, that's not going to be very good because the normal person on the street does not know how a company operates. They do not know the verbiage used in that company. They do not understand why. Well, because they're not in that company. It's not that they are not clever enough, it's just that they're not in that environment. So, therefore, you have to learn from this side to make sure the other side understands it. As it's been said many times before, if you cannot explain it to somebody, that means that you don't understand it yourself. We should all be able to explain everything so clearly to the other person that we are talking with. So, therefore, have good communication skills. Make sure that the information coming out is factual, timely, and provided in a terminology that people understand it without having any issues of misunderstanding information and making up a story around it. Being very, very clear on what those questions and answers are. Being able to take questions of any kind of audience to be able to answer it. And if, for example, there is no answer, it's not a problem. You can say, it's a very good question. Let me go back and find the answer for you. You don't have to have all the answers on the spot. This is not possible most of the time. So, giving yourself the right to say, I will go back to it. This also shows that you are collaborating, you are listening, you are open to any ideas to solve the problem. So it shows that you are concerned, shows that you are committed to finalizing and finishing the actual situation. So therefore, that communication comes in very, very key here. The three C's: showing that you're concerned, showing that you're committed, showing that you are in control. But not just showing because of showcasing, but showing it in fact that you are doing that. You are actually committed. You are actually have the situation under control, and are genuinely concerned. It's not just a play. It's the fact that you must have the moral compass to make sure that happens. Review the values. Put yourself in on the other side. What would you like to see? What would you like to hear? What information do you want to come to in what format? But after all, we're all human. We all want the same things. If you have the opportunity to listen to people of various ages and different sexes, ask them, what would you like to listen to? What do you like to hear? What kind of person would like you to hear from? Would you like the CEO to communicate? Or would you like the food safety person? Or the lawyer? Or the communication officer? Who would you like to see? Would you like to see them behind a desk, standing up, in public? Do you want them in a suit? Do you want them in a dress? Do you want them in t-shirts and shoes that are for running? I don't know. But there is where you need to understand who your audience is and what is the best way you need to communicate with them. Because that bond needs to be made to allow them to trust the truth that's coming out. Allow them to trust you that you are committed. Allow them to trust you that you have concern, genuine concern. It's not just a play. And that they understand and they understand that you are in control and giving them the confidence. And after all of that's done, have to end it and say, we have now, the crisis is over, this is over. Let us review how we did. And based on that, let's update our standards and create some kind of training, education for our internal folks in order to do a better job next time. That review process of showing what are the changes and what are the positives and negatives is very important to move that forward. It is that area that provides us to have continuous improvement in any part, and not just the communication part, but also what kind of data did we not have? What kind of data do we need? Did we get the information as quickly as we possibly could have done? Was there somebody who didn't know and made the wrong decision? Did we pick the right leader to lead us through? Did we have a good communication process through our ways of gathering the data? Did we have good traceability program to trace and see where is our product that is under question? All of these factors come under review and can be subject to an update, and making sure that if it happens again, hopefully it won't, but if it does happen again, we're in a much better position to have the actual incident managed, the product handled where. Do we need to withdraw? Do we need to recall? Or do we do nothing? And if we do we notify anybody or do we not need to? These are the key questions that need to be asked to understand how can we better manage our instances and handle the products. And sometimes you say, well, the product, can that product be used elsewhere? So, for example, looking at possibilities of using that product. If the ingredient comes in and we find out that the ingredient is nothing wrong with it and can be used, can it be used again or can it be redirected to another part that we can be used as food and not wasted? So we also consider those things as well to be able to also communicate to say we held it back, but now we know we can use it again because it is totally safe to use. With all that said, I'm very happy that I was able to get through this without any technical issues. Hopefully, we can have some question and answers, and hopefully, I can answer your question. If not, I will try and find the answer for you some other time. Thank you very much.
You. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Bijan. Yeah, it's exact alarm that there is a question time, and we have already some, and there are questions. Two questions at the same time came from Chiara Kane, and I will read it out too, and then you will answer by one. So the first question is, within McDonald's, do you test the recall methods and procedures at a regional and global level, and how many times is it tested? And the second question is also, do you have a management mitigation plans for specific crucial materials or ingredients for supply chain?
So, yeah, hopefully, I can remember both questions. First
Yeah.
question, and do we have a process? Yes, every supplier, every distribution center that we have, they go through a mock exercise every year as part of an annual audit or internal part as well. They actually get asked about a traceability program. Do they have a crisis management program? Yes, we do have that as part of the requirement that we put into place for all of them. And most of the time, we find that people have already had an issue themselves. Nothing serious, but for example, a mislabeling of a product or the label was incorrect on the box, so they had to withdraw it, so they had to do a traceability and get it back. If they haven't, they must have a mock exercise conducted. On top of that, in the European market at the moment, we also have an external program that we do unannounced. So somebody calls the supplier up and says, product X has an issue, trace it for me, and they have 3 hours to do one up, one down, and a few more hours to do all the way back to the raw material source. So we find that out. And over time, people have learned and improved, and we are at a very good level because the suppliers that we have learned from those and been able to escalate it to a better position. But you know, it never is perfect. We always find that there's something happens. Most of the time, things go wrong because people panic and they don't want to seem that they got it wrong and then make a quick decision without telling anybody. And it's always that a human factor we must overcome and say it's okay to be wrong. It's okay not to know. But the more people we have together, we can work it out. So let's communicate. Your second question
Should I
was,
repeat it? Should I repeat it? Yeah.
yes, please.
Okay, sure. Do you have a management mitigation plans for specific critical materials or ingredients for supply chain distributions?
Yes, only because over time we've learned which ones are the riskiest and which ones are not. And the risk is not just on safety, it's also about a short supply. It's also making sure that everybody is going to be in a good place. So, for example, we have a whole list of risks that exist. Chemical contamination like dioxins, like polyfluoride compounds, or pathogenic bacteria such as E. coli strains, salmonella. So we have those plans in place, microbiological analysis of the raw material, positive release. So yes, we do have for certain ones, some of them, yes.
Okay, perfect. We have more questions. You know, there are already chat is bombing. Next question is coming from Kevin. How agile can a local region of a global company like McDonald's be when it comes to taking preventive actions, especially given the scale of their organization and the drive of global
Yes,
standardization?
very good question. There is an English saying that say, "How do you eat an elephant?" And you say, "Bite at a time." So you don't go and manage the whole thing because it will never work. So you take a small part of it. So from a local environment, each market, suppliers, they're trained, or we hope they are trained in crisis management, instant management. So immediately they get together, whoever discovers it gets together with the local team, discuss it, brings in the global team to help advise. Global will not take over. Global let management locally do it because they understand the local, unless it is a cross-border thing and they need to have globally managing it, then it happens. So we discuss it, who is going to be the lead, is it a market, is it global, is it regional? So it can be very agile, in fact, and there are cases when this is run as smooth as it should be, it is very fast because you're only a phone call away from each other. And it's no longer like when I first started that you send the fax and 3 days later you get an answer on a piece of paper that after 2 days the letter disappears. So we don't have those kind of things. We're very agile these days because of technology. And one of the key things to make sure that's agile is we must move back to seeing each other face to face and not be remote like this. We are social animals. We need to interact. So when you know somebody, it's a lot easier to pick the phone up and ask them a question. If you've never met them before, it's very difficult. And you send an email. They may not see the email for 3 days. So we have to reestablish that communication to make it agile. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely true. Next question is coming from Tracy. How to train employees on crisis management?
Several different ways. You can actually, again, it depends on what kind of audience do you have? If you have those audiences who like to sit in the classroom and listen to you, then do a classroom. If those are the ones who like interaction, do interactions. So personally, I've been involved with doing a webinar like this, all the way to a 5 day live call with real situations and having scenarios built and actors. And in that one, I acted as a father of a very hurt young boy. So I was acting up as it, for example, on a camera. So they watch a video. Or at the same time, when an action that you're walking down the street and suddenly camera crew jump in your face and ask you a question, you can go to ultimate extremes, and different people in the organization require different training. So the CEO, for example, the upper management need to be trained in media training. In somebody in the middle of the street putting a microphone in their face and saying, "What are you doing about those people that died?" They should be able to answer that kind of question, not be caught like a rabbit in the headlights. But then at the ground level, the supply chain folks should be very much involved in how do I get information, who do I call, etc. So it's different kind of training, but it can be done, and there are plenty of training programs to do that.
Thank you, Bijan. Next question from Ali. How can we differentiate between incidents and accidents in terms of quality and food safety with regards to crisis management?
Sure. An accident can become an incident, an incident can become an accident. So they're interchangeable. And an accident usually occurs, of course, when it is unexpected. But an incident can be expected, it can be fraudulent, it could be planned. Accidents are not planned. So an accident situation is very much of a be on the alert, be able to respond very quickly, very fast, because an accident is something that's a surprise and you need to do something really quickly. In order to avoid accidents, you have your HACCP programs, for example, preventative programs. And your instant one is your instant management program, such as your simulated uh, trainings.
Thank you. Next question comes from Stuart.
Hello.
Bijan, hope you're well. In terms of brand protection, who is the responsible primary stakeholder in this situation? McDonald's or is dependent on the situation?
You answered the question there, Stuart. It depends on the situation and who's responsible. But to be honest, for food safety, we're all responsible. All of us need to be accountable because only together we run a supply chain. So each one of us, so I will be responsible for providing information. Some will be responsible for collecting information. Some will be responsible for providing information outwardly. So we are responsible in different ways, but it is always wrong to point the finger and say it's your fault. No, don't do that. That doesn't achieve anything. In fact, what it does, it brings the barriers up, the walls go up, and you will not get anything achieved. So we have to first of all of us take the responsibility to solve it. When it's all solved, when the dust is settled, then we go on the review cycle and say, okay, which person or people need to be retrained, and then because it is not always the fault of the person who made the mistake. It's sometimes the fault of the person who didn't train those guys properly or reviewed their training. So it's not always the fault is not always left on the one that's the obvious one. So try not to point a finger, but try to solve and see what can we do to improve it.
Thank you. Next question comes from Mohammed. Are allergic contamination included in recall standard?
They can be, and for us, recalls are very rare because we don't give food out for people to eat much later. But yes, they can be, and sometimes people buy items which are mislabeled. So, for example, if you go and buy say you buy a sandwich, no, let's make it easier, a bar chocolate, and you take that bar chocolate home, and not McDonald's, but somewhere else, and on there it doesn't say it has peanuts, a mislabeling. And when the supplier finds out, they must put a note out in the media to bring that product back because of that risk. So yes, recalls can be, allergic contamination can be, yes.
Thank you. Next question is very interesting. Could I have points that I can teach to my team about crisis management and incident handling according to IFS and BRCGS food standards?
Sure. I mean, both IFS and BRCGS, they are very good standards and they are allow you a lot of breadth on how to actually train and manage your crises or incident processes. So what they both of those look for in different ways, but the same, essentially the same, they ask for a program that actually can be robust enough to manage the risk. So it doesn't, none of them say you must do A, B, C, and D and only these. They say here are a few things you can do, but as a whole, you must be able to manage the risk. And that is done through one of the risks is people not being trained. So you have to train them in order to to understand how to manage it. So both standards, the same as FSCC and SQF, they're the same as well. And also Global Gap, the same. All of the actual standards that we have internationally ask for similar things, and they keep it broad because there is always more than one way to get the goal.
Thank you. Next question comes from Edris. How to ensure that the crisis management system is working effectively inside the organization?
The last and the most $1 million question. How do you know it works? Um, you know it works when it runs very smoothly. You know it works when nobody's panicking. You know it works when it's like this is a normal day. There is a sense of urgency, but that sense of urgency is not creating panic. It's not creating any anxiety. It just goes through at just a faster rate. And that's when you can see it. It's like a well-oiled machine. It works really well. And if you want to get it like that, then you just practice and practice and practice. And you will find ingenious ways of coming up with issues, the things that you think will never happen. We never thought, the horse gate occurs. We never thought that there was going to be a pandemic. In fact, to be honest, we all knew, but we thought it's not going to happen. It's just that you put it back in your mind, no, it's not. But always think about those ingenious ways of coming up with the training programs.
Thank you. Next question. Is there any use of digitalized technologies in terms of types of incidents and the impact these could potentially have through discrete simulation analysis?
Yes, AI can be used for anything. And so digitalization of traceability is a perfect example of how to be able to know exactly where your product is. Imagine if you have a live RFID in every single one of your products, so you know exactly where it is. So when it comes down to recalling it, you know exactly what to call back. That's one of them. Also, you could have the information of every single item digitalized so that if there's an issue, you know exactly what is the product, where is it not. And also digitalization can help having accuracy of information. So mislabeling will not occur. Training programs can occur. You can create training programs using digital systems available to use holograms to train people and not have them live in a risky environment. You can deliver those training programs much more effectively individually, gaming systems. So yeah, the digital world, the technology that we are seeing today is giving us so much that we can do to improve ourselves. But a thing is that unfortunately, the food industry is always the last one to take these things up. So, and as you know, ISO 9001, for example, industry was the last one to take it up. It's like, why? So we're always last, and we should not be last. We should just go forward and do these things.
Yeah, and I think next question is coming out of this because what is the next crisis to be prepared for?
Well, if I can get my crystal ball out and tell you what it is, that's going to be um, from what I can see. The next one is a sad one to say. I think is war. I think it's war. We are starting to see signs of it locally happening in different parts of it, and if it escalates, then we are dealing with that, which will add all the crises that you could think of will come up to be, because what war does is stop supply. It reduces hygiene. It creates fraud. All the things, all the crises we've ever seen anywhere will come up because of war. And that's what scares me. And preparing for it is just being prepared to take it again, like the first question, take it a bite at a time. Do not try to handle the whole thing. So we come full circle.
Yeah, unfortunately, I will take the opportunity to ask question, which I prepared. Uh, what are the latest innovations McDonald has implemented to enhance product quality?
Sure. So right now, in our restaurants, for example, we are deploying digitalization of any food safety standard. So all our checklists that we do on a daily basis, you go to see, is my beef cooked at the right temperature, etc. These are all digitalized now. So we're almost at 100% coverage of all our restaurants across the world. Next one is temperature monitoring, live, real product temperature monitoring. So in a storage area, you know what the temperature of the product is. And so we're digitalizing food safety to make it easier, to reduce the possibility of people making mistakes, and of course be much more robust because the data is real and it is alerting system. So if something goes out of spec, it's alerted. So you work by exception rather than continuously checking. Going towards activity based rather than hazard based. So for example, should you cleaning the toilet every hour if there's been no customers? Why? Why not check it every 20 customers? So activity based rather than So that way you make it more efficient, but you're targeting about these things. So digitalizing the restaurant environment is one of the key ones we're doing. We're reviewing our auditing processes and making sure that his risk-based approach is much more relevant to those areas. So in the food safety part, that's the areas we're actually touching upon at the moment.
Yeah, and what about food production environmental monitoring? Are there any innovation which you can share with us, which you implemented? And
I mean, different people use different things, and suppliers across the world, depending on how advanced they are, they use digital ways of doing things. So RFID is one of them to try to actually get information much more accurately, traceability programs into reason codes of things going wrong, how to overcome and gather data across the system more effectively. Other things that we also are looking across to do is working with suppliers on new innovations on hand hygiene, on air monitoring, packaging standards, just like everybody else in the industry is doing. So we're no different to anybody else because we've worked with others, people in the industry and companies, big companies that work with us also have their own ideas of innovation. So we're not doing anything out of this world. People think, oh, McDonald's, you must be doing something extraordinary. It's like, no, we're not. We're just like everybody else. We are as committed as everybody else. And we just happen to have a very large environment and be able to work with big people and a lot of them. So we make bigger noise because we're just big. But we are just doing just like everybody else, trying to work on the best innovations that are out there.
thank you very much, Bijan. And as far as I see, no questions for now. I think for now we can finish our amazing webinar. But honestly, I would talk even more hours with you.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone who attended this webinar. It was really amazing to hear these questions, to talk to you even virtually. I hope soon we will go offline, and I'm already inviting everyone to join. And don't hesitate to join our next webinar session, which will be already in August because it's a summertime. Everyone is going on holiday. So like we are not anymore meeting so often, but
Mm.
still follow us on LinkedIn, and we are constantly updating you with the further webinars, and plus we will share recording as well there. And have a nice day, everyone, and just amazing upcoming weekends and a great summer holidays if someone is having soon.
And you too.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye.